up, travelers? How are you today? Firstly, sorry I missed Friday's video. Oscar and I were just trying to make the most out of being in Korea. It's our old home, so we really wanted to enjoy it to the max. So now I'm here in Taipei. I just flew in from Incheon last night on a low-cost carrier in a premium cabin that I was kind of dreading. So if you want to find out what carrier I was flying, you can head over to my Instagram. Also, you may be wondering, Daniel, why the heck are you recording a video from outdoors in Taipei? Long story short, this is the only way I could get this video recorded while I still had daylight, because we won't be home in time to record in our apartment. So YouTuber on the go traveler struggles right here. Anyway, let's get into the video, shall we? Today's video is all about my favorite airline. You guys always leave the most brutal comments when I make British Airways videos, because you're all like, Daniel, you hate British Airways. It's obvious, but it's actually not entirely like that. Actually, it's not like that at all. I don't hate British Airways. In fact, I really want to like them. And I actually had an incredible flight on their 747 in first class back in February this year. So if you want to check out that review, I'll put it in a card right now in either corner, wherever it appears. But unfortunately, I do feel that unless you're flying first class, British Airways just doesn't care enough about their customers. Between charging over $100 for seat selection on a single long-haul business class flight to removing all in-flight service in economy class within Europe, and even reducing it on many long-haul flights in economy, they've made it very clear that they care more about profit than their customers. But if you're flying British Airways for some reason, it might be good to know which of their business class products is the best, how they rank, and of course, how it compares to their first class if you're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be considering that. And what's most interesting is that their new business class has doors, which they don't even have on their first class. So let's figure out that logic there. But can their first class still be better? Let's see. So let's start with British Airways' new business class seat. This seat may seem unique, but it's actually a custom version of one of the most common business class seats in the world. If you've flown business on Qatar Airways, American Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Air Canada, China Airlines, China Eastern, KLM, Air France, and many more, this is the same seat type. British Airways has emphasized the privacy aspect of this seat, even though it's already among the most private business class seats in the world in the configuration that American and Cathay use, among others. British Airways has decided to take it a step further by adding the door. Now, as I noticed in my review, this really only makes a difference if you're in bed mode, since you have total privacy thanks to the door. When you're seated upright, you can still see over the door, which is different from other seats with doors like the Q Suite, for example. This seat also rectifies some of the main issues with British Airways' previous business class seat, namely the lack of storage. There's only one storage compartment in the old seat. And yes, it's big, and yes, you can fit almost anything and everything you want to keep down there and keep it private and safe, but once you're in bed, you can't access it since the seat reclines above it. This was a huge drag and a major design flaw in the old seat. With the new seat, you have tons of storage in different shapes and sizes, including the surface next to your seat, so you won't be struggling to find a place to put your stuff. There is one exception though, and that is in the window seats on the upper deck of British Airways A380 Club World. Here you have huge storage bins on the side that come standard on the A380 upper deck, so you go from almost no storage to abundant storage. Another huge upgrade for the new seat is that you don't have to face a stranger during boarding in some parts of the flight, like you did in the old seat. Since the seats alternate direction, the aisle seats face forward and the window seats face back. This makes for an incredibly awkward moment when you really have few places to stare except at the stranger opposite you. This obviously isn't a problem if you're traveling with someone you know. For me, the optimal British Airways product though would be traveling with Oscar or a family member or a friend on the upper deck of the A380, since you'd have plenty of storage and be able to sit close to each other and talk easily, which actually isn't so easy in the new seat. On my A350 flight in Club Suite, the couple next to me had to talk really loudly and bend over to hear each other. In the grand scheme of things though, the new seat still is a lot better. So what about first class? Is the new seat with its increased privacy and storage better than the old kind of exposed first class? Well, before I give you the answer, let's have a quick tour and refresh of the British Airways 747 first class seat from my review in February. Alright guys, welcome on board British Airways 747 First Class. First, this was something I found actually really cool. Check this out. We have a built-in hangar here, which can withstand all types of turbulence, some storage, and down here we have room to put our shoes, which we'll do after takeoff. Then we have the video monitor here, which swivels out somehow. Footrest, of course, with the headphones waiting there. But here we have our remote. This is the seat recline roller, which I find kind of cool. The in-flight magazines are here. The tray table comes up from there. And as you can see, we have a very fancy screen in front of the windows. This is what it looks like when I look out. So when I'm sitting in my seat, I do not see anyone else, although I do feel like if there were people all across, because we can see the entire row here, it's definitely not the most private first class product. Pause the video now and let me know in the comments, what do you think? Is this seat better or worse? In my opinion, it's still better since it has so much more space. While this isn't an entirely accurate comparison, it might be useful to compare how many British Airways Club suites would fit in the space that they currently squeeze 14 first class seats on their Boeing 777-200. In approximately the same space, Air France, who uses the same reverse herringbone seat structure as British Airways with the Club Suite, fits 28 business class seats in that space. In other words, the first class seats still take up around twice as much space as the Club Suites would. You'll have far more space by your feet in bed mode. You have a closet, you don't have to squeeze to get out of your seat, etc. Now the seat might not be quite as private, which is something I'd love to see British Airways improve, but just based on the space alone, British Airways First Class still wins. You might also want to compare the price, since the price difference between first class and business class can vary substantially. Sometimes with miles, first class can cost just 10,000 miles more than business, in which case I think choosing first class over Club Suites would be a no-brainer. So my overall lesson is that you should probably, unfortunately, choose another airline for pretty much any cabin, including first class. If I had to distinguish though and rate them, I would still say that British Airways First Class is miles ahead of their business class, even if we're just comparing the seat. The first class seat is so much more spacious, and the biggest difference is noticeable in bed mode when you recline, because in first class, your foot space isn't restricted. You can move around however you want, but in business class, your feet and your legs go under the seat in front of you, so your space is just not as good. Besides, this video just compared the seats. If we're considering the service that you'll be getting in first class, that is obviously going to be much better than business class, between more personalized attention from flight attendants, better meals, better amenities, pajamas, nicer bedding, all that stuff. As far as the famous old business class seats go, which are still far from the worst business class seats, in my opinion, I'd actually rather fly BA's old business class seats than Virgin's business class seats on most of their fleet. There's one instance where I prefer them, and that is if you can fly on the upper deck of the A380. I know this is probably the most surprising part for you guys, but there's one instance where I prefer the old British Airways business class seat, and that is if you're flying in a window on the upper deck of the A380, because you'll have huge storage bins to the side of your seat where you can put stuff inside and on top of them. And once you put up the privacy partition to the seat next to you and recline your seat, you'll have one of the most private business class seats in the world. And combining that with the storage, it's quite a decent seat. Of course, the soft product might still not be as good as many competitors, especially if you're flying east from Europe, so that may be something to consider. Once again, if you somehow can get a first class flight on British Airways and get to enjoy that experience, I recommend that over business class any day. And I've made videos on how to use your miles to redeem for British Airways First Class. There's actually a secret hack, well, not super secret, but there's one route where you can get a really cheap ticket in British Airways First Class using your British Airways miles that are also super easy to redeem. So I made a video going over all the best redemptions with British Airways that I'll put in a card now and in the description below. British Airways has one of my favorite mileage programs in the world, so I strongly recommend you check it out. And if you're in Sweden, this will be, I think, the second last shout out I give to this. You have 1 week left to get increased sign-up bonuses on the Swedish Amex cards, where you can then transfer your points over to British Airways and redeem for super cheap first class flights. So you'll get 25% extra, up to over 20,000 British Airways points, which is already halfway to a British Airways first class ticket. So I recommend you check that out if you want. But anyway, thank you so much guys for watching. It's not quite starting to rain yet, but we're going to get some bubble tea, our first bubble tea in Taiwan. and I'm so excited. And thank you for joining me in this park. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video for a more formal setting, but until then, as always, fly safe.